Leaves are
You're here all night. I don't know,
I guess.
how much.
We begin today by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Wolastoqey. These territories are covered by treaties of peace and friendship of the Wolastoqey people, first signed with the British Crown in 1725. Call the meeting to order. Attendance has been taken. Yes. Approval of the agenda,
So moved, Dale Murray.
second by,
Bob Powell or Mucko?
any discussion? Ready for the question?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Are there any conflict of interest for disclosure? No? Okay. We'll move on to number 5, the draft 2026 budget. Good morning. Today makes a new approach for the commission. This is the first time meeting as a committee of the whole. Some of you may have used this format in your own municipalities, and as we know, those practices can vary depending on the council's culture. Here at the RSC, our goal today is straightforward. To provide an open forum where we can discuss the 2026 budget in more depth and with more flexibility than we would in a formal board meeting. There are no binding decisions made here. Our role is to explore the numbers, clarify key issues, and work toward a recommendation for the board. At this point, I will turn the role of chair for today's process over to Director Corey as chair of the Finance Committee. Director Corey?
Judy. Used to say, never put yourself in a room full of type A people and expect it to go easy. Now, here we are. So. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone of some of the ground rules of the committee of the whole. Now, whether they're your ground rules or not, they're gonna be the ones we're gonna have today. While the format is more relaxed, we need a productive and respectful structure. I'll make sure that everyone gets their opportunity to speak and have their questions responded to. Please wait to be recognized before speaking, just as you would at the board table. We may have to limit time on some items, not to cut people off, but to ensure we stay focused, and move forward. If discussion starts drifting, and it can happen in this group, not so much when I'm not talking. So when it does, I'll summarize and move us on with the group's agreement. And finally, I know there are some concerns about components of the RSC's mandate and cost sharing formulas and other issues. Those are valid topics, but they're not the topic for today. The topic today is the budget. We're not remanaging the organization as we sit here. We're going to look at the financial side of the operation, and while all questions are valid and everything will be noted, we're not here to solve all of the problems of the organization today. So it's a working session. Our job is to build consensus. There will be no decision, although the topics that we talk about and the discussions that we have today will foster lots of decisions as we go down the road. They will not be made here today. So just give a shot. Let's begin. Question.
Thank you, Director Corey. And Mr. Chair, I guess in this particular venue, through you to the members, I just, before we get going, I just wanted to say a big thank you to our CFO, Mary Kay Langton, and their management team and the whole team on the financial side for getting the budget together. We've had some good discussions at the Finance Committee meeting, and Mary Kay will walk us through here today, and then certainly field the questions. And we also have Craig with us, our Chief Operating Officer, and he'll answer questions on a number of subjects as well. And we have Keith Vanderbilt, who's our Chief Building Inspector, who's pinch hitting for the, as we jokingly say, the wizard of all knowledge here, Lonnie Forbes, with us today. So we hope he's having a good day. So, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to address the table, and Mary Kay, thank you so much for all your hard work on the budget, putting this together.
So Mary Kay, it's all yours.
Just maybe somebody could give us an idea where the fireworks are and that kind of thing, in case we need them.
the fire exit. Oh,
Bathroom.
yes, so
Bathrooms.
yeah, so back here, immediately to my left at the back of the room, there is a exit door. You'll see the exit sign here to my right. When you go out into the hall, halfway down the hall, you're gonna see an exit sign immediately outside this door. And there's an exit sign just up the hallway here. And there's also, if anything were to happen, you can go in through the office, stay to the left. And at the first hallway on your right, take a right, and in there, there's an emergency fire escape door as well that will take you downstairs. So anyway, thank you, Director Sharp.
So I think what we'll end up going to go through one piece of the budget at a time, and then there will be some questions and discussion, and then we'll move on from there. Thank you. Mary Kay, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to walk you through our draft 2026 budget. The goal of this meeting is really to give you a clear picture of where our resources are going, what's driving our costs, and how we're preparing for the future. So I'll try to keep it as simple as possible, focus on big takeaways, and then we're going to leave lots of room for questions and discussion so that we can make sure that this budget really reflects all of our shared priorities. So just by way of an overview, for our 2026 budget, our member charges for our newer mandated services are proposed to increase by 46,000, and that's mostly due to a change in our allocation method for our corporate services expenses. When we get into that budget, I'll explain that a little bit further. But overall, those member charges are going to go down. Participating member charges for planning and development are proposed to increase by 217,000. And we'll talk about some of the driving points behind those. And then our solid waste tipping fee, we're proposing a $5 increase per ton, which would leave a tipping fee for 2026 of $109 per ton. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so the first budget that we're going to look at is corporate services. And what makes up our corporate services budget is expenses that support the entire commission. So they're not specific to divisions. There's no specific revenue sources in corporate services. It's a cost center. And so those expenses get allocated out to the various divisions to pay for. So in each individual budget, you're going to see a line that says allocation from corporate services. That is those expenses and where divisions pay for them. So in prior years, all of our divisions shared equally in paying the corporate admin expenses. We've made a change this year. So for 2026, our admin expenses are allocated out to the various divisions proportionate to their share of the budget. What that means is larger budgets pay more of the corporate service allocation, smaller budgets pay less. So you're going to see a jump in corporate service allocation for planning and development, solid waste, and economic development, as those are the larger budgets, but you're going to see decreases in all of the other service lines. So for 2026, what's driving our corporate service costs? Our board costs are reflecting additional budget meetings. So we are proposing 2 committee of the whole meetings for the budget process. That's been reflected in the 2026 budget. We also have a new space that we're in today. So there's the actual rental costs that are factored into 2026 budget. And we also have a boardroom that needs to be set up. So we are incurring some costs in 2025. Some of those will be pushed to 2026. So we have adjusted the budget accordingly for that. So looking at the expenses, the first line that you'll see in front of you is salaries and benefits. So that is the corporate service staff, the staff that you see in this room that work on various divisions. So that's pretty flat compared to the prior year budget. As you know, we did have the retirement of 1 staff member, but we did have staff that took on additional work as a result of that. So that resulted in adjustments. And there's a part-time resource that's included in there, plus our CPI adjustments that staff receives annually, as well as the board receives CPI adjustment. So overall salaries and benefits budget is $1,225,000. Governance or our board expenses are up $17,000 from the previous year's budget. The honorariums, as I discussed on the previous slide, that includes the additional committee of the whole meetings for the budget, as well as the CPI adjustment for the honorariums. Our meeting expenses, we've changed those by $8,000. We've increased it. which would take care of costs associated with our summer and winter forums, and that's what's based on the actual cost that we're seeing at this point. Travel is up 6,000. That reflects the mileage for when board members attend meetings, and then our training and development's down slightly. That would include costs associated with the orientation of a new board coming to place in 2026. For the administration expenses, if you jump down to the subtotal, you can see they're up just under 105,000. There's really three areas that are driving that increase, and all related to our new office space. So office equipment and supplies, as I talked about, there is costs associated with the boardroom setup, so we've increased that by 20,000. Office maintenance is not something that we previously allocated to corporate services, but we felt that that was fair with our new office space. So that would be a cost of 18,550. And then the rental that's charged for corporate services is 193,000. That's up about 55,000 from the previous year's budget. The other items that you see where there's small changes, there's no description in there. That really just means that we've changed the budget for 2026 to reflect the actuals of what we're currently seeing in those items. So overall, our corporate services expenses are up just under 120,000 to a total of 1,887,000. And if I had to summarize, it's additional board costs, rent, cleaning up that space, and then setup of the boardroom.
Any questions? A small item. I see,
Larry, to me, then they're.
okay, to you. Well, I guess I don't know the rules yet. Through chairman to financial expert, financial expert. Very small thing, but I notice, memberships and subscriptions jump 100%. Seems odd to me.
For you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's reflecting the actual. So items that are included in memberships they were previously under budgeted for, that would be UNMP memberships, my professional membership for accounting designation, and that's just reflecting in what we're actually spending. We also, something that was added is AI memberships.
Okay.
So that's what's driving that.
Can't help you with AI.
Any additional questions? Do we have anyone?
For you, Mr. Chair, should we be capitalizing the boardroom as it's fitted? Or should that just go directly on expense?
We will absolutely be capitalizing that, but the way that the municipal accounting standards work is we have to expense it first. We have to pay for it and then it gets capitalized as well in our financial statements.
Do we have anyone on? Any additional questions? Okay. You don't.
So the next budget that we're gonna look at is cooperative and regional planning. Just as a reminder, this fund facilitates cooperation between members, which includes regional planning discussions. So our drivers for 2026, it's a lower corporate service allocation as we talked about. So if we jump into the numbers, with these smaller budgets, I like to start at the expenses and then we'll work our way back up to revenue. So you can see we have 50,000 for regional planning and administration, which is consistent with what we've had in previous years. And then our allocation from corporate services is down 66,000. So overall, our budget for cooperative and regional planning is 302,459, or that $66,000 decrease. For revenues, we have RSSF of 151,000. That represents 50% of the cost that we're eligible to claim RSSF for. And then our second previous year surplus was up almost 20,000 to 42,000, which means the amount that we actually have to charge the membership is 109,152, or about 53,000 less than what we had in previous years for member fees.
Any questions on the corporate and regional planning services? Move on.
The next budget that we'll look at is tourism promotion. So for 2026, as you know, we have a contract with the city, and it reflects a CPI adjustment every year, so that's been included in the expense. And then we have, an increase in RSSF funding, which is funding 50% of these costs. And that offsets a decrease in our second previous year surplus, which was. So starting with expenses, you can see for professional services, that's a budget of $1,561,000. That's up 18,000 from the previous year. Allocation from corporate services is pretty consistent, at 124,000, for a total budget of $1,686,000. Jumping up to revenue, you'll see RSSF is up about 10,000 to 843,000. Our second previous year surplus is down at 1242, which means the member charges are up 17,000 to $841,971.
Any questions on the regional tourism promotion services?
Question, Mr. Chair. Through the charter account. When I see professional services, am I correct in assuming that covers studies and consultants and that sort of thing? Is that what?
That's that's our professional service contract that we have with the city of Fredericton that provides the tourism promotion services. So we have a contract with them and they look after all areas of the promotions. John might want to elaborate on that a little bit.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, through you to the member, so the overall contract is a set, and we know each year that it's adjusted to CPI. We adjusted to CPI and anything outside of that, the only other thing that we would have is a small amount of funding towards anything extra that may come out of there through our economic expansion. And then that would be it. But other than that, we're consistent. It reflects our CPI for projects and for efforts to drive. And so we're also in that, you'll see the work that the infrastructure committee is doing on the trail studies and things like that through infrastructure. So we're doing very well with that. The numbers are up consistently everywhere in the region. Not everyone is 100% satisfied. I'll take 85 to 90 any day of the week. But we have a professional service provider, and just to give you just a very brief thing that I often say, in 2022, we had tourism guide, the largest tourism guide in the region had less than 100 offerings. Today in 2025, through the great work of the Fredericton Capital Region Tourism, we have over 500 offerings and operators listed in the tourism guide for the region. And we see that benefit all throughout, whether you're in a fishing tournament in Nackwick, Millville, you're at Pioneer Days and or Mocto. We're out at the folk song festivals and whether it be Central York Arcade here, the things, and Director Nicklin just recently his community just recently purchased a park. And all of these things start to get folded in there. And currently, the tourism folks are going around meeting with each community, and they're going to be adding even more things onto their events.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions?
Through the chair, to our CEO, in our previous meetings, I brought up the fact that I know tourism needed an avenue when you first started, and that I would assume that going forward we would be looking at all options based, like just as to do with Ignite and everybody else, and we'd have more than one option at the table to choose from moving forward, maybe.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, through you to Director Nicklin, the contracts that we have currently have an option to renew within them if the mutual agreement of both parties. And that would be a further discussion down the road for the board when we come to the renewal period.
Any additional questions? Okay.
The next budget you'll see is economic development. It's very similar to tourism promotion. We have a service contract provider. So for 2026, our contract with Ignite It reflects the CPI adjustment that's included in there. Something new for 2026 is we actually had a second previous year deficit, a small one that came in from 2024. And we have a higher allocation of corporate services expenses because of the larger budget that economic development has. So starting with expenses, you can see under professional services, the total cost of that is $2,307,000. That's up 44,000 from the previous year, or 2%. Our second previous year surplus is $5,855, which is 2024's deficit. And then our allocation from corporate services is up 46,000 to 169,000. So total budget for economic development is $2,482,000, or a $96,000 increase over the previous year. For revenue sources, we do have pedal funding, which specifically pays for a MOU that we do have for Ignite. So that's included below in professional services. 100% of that expense is covered. We have regional services support funding of $838,000, and then no second previous year surplus from 2024, which means the member charges have to be $838,442, or an increase of approximately $40,000.
Just on this one, this is where we start to note the RSSF funding coming in, and you always have to match with 50-cent dollars, the RSSF funding, so that the pedal funding is under the agreement and contract before, so. Any questions on the regional economic? Excuse me, I'm in the, back end.
Just, paddle, PEDL,
Post-secondary education, training and labor.
perfect, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Move on.
All right, that brings us to community development. So what you're gonna see for 2026 is we did have a change of employees, so we have a little less salaries and benefits expenses. We've now allocated a share of rental charges because community development does have 2 offices in this space, and there's less corporate service expense allocation. So looking at the expenses, you can see salaries and benefits are down 15,000. Professional services are down 5,000. We have the rent coming in, which is 14,599. Slight adjustment to some of the administration costs, but overall, our community development expenses are down 8,100 to a budget of 233,000. Our allocation from corporate services is down significantly because we did have our former COOs, a lot of it was spent in corporate services, so we had that savings that passes on to community development. So decrease in corporate service allocation of 86,000, meaning the total budget is down by 95,000 to 319,195. If you look up at revenue, you will see a grant that comes in from ESIC of 10,535. That's to cover some of the operational costs that we have. The regional services support funding pays 50%, which is 159,000. Our second previous year surplus is down from the previous year to a total of 13,261. But it's important to keep in mind, we did transfer 25,000 to an operating reserve in 2024. So we do have an operating reserve that's set up. That's why you're seeing the decrease in the second previous year surplus. Which means our member charges for 2026 have to be 135,801, or a decrease of 14,000 from the previous year.
The ESIC grant, that acronym is?
Go ahead.
Economic and social inclusion. Sometimes I don't even know it.
Any questions?
Questions through you to the CFO or CEO. What's the differentiation between economic development and community development? We have 2 separate budget categories. I just wondering what the differentiations.
Mr. Chair, through you to the member. So the community development is talking about how do you bring communities together? What are they working on? So we have an 8-point plan that was approved by the board. And we're also responsible for implementing Overcoming Poverty 4 through the Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation. And that's what those contracts are for. In that, you'll see on our community development website, they'll talk about how we bring nonprofits, non-government organizations together in terms of that and how we go out there. Some of the things that we're doing last year, we were out facilitating, helping not-for-profits and NGOs understand how to write a professional grant, get grant writing in there, bring them in to help make them a little bit more self-sufficient. We're also meeting with them to create synergies between them to ensure that we are working in the communities that need that specific help and then working in other communities that need other help. So we're actually just about to complete a study that the government of New Brunswick sponsored. It should, I'm actually, Brett and I are meeting with the consultants tomorrow to talk about the synergies. So where do we avoid duplication? How do we make sure that we're giving communities the services that they need? And what are those bigger issues that are more problematic for every community, whether that be homelessness, mental health, or poverty reduction? So it's those types of things, Director DeLong, that we're working on. I don't know, Brett, if you have anything more that you want to add to that?
I think, yeah, I think so.
Just curious.
Additional questions? We'll move on, Joy.
So regional transportation is the next budget that we'll look at, and again, it's a fairly straightforward budget. The drivers for 2026 is less corporate services allocation. So looking at expenses, professional services, the 86,000 plus the non-refundable portion of HST, that reflects the maximum cost of our urban rural rides contract. So that's a total of 89,686. Our allocation from corporate services is down about 42,000 from the previous year to 60,000, which gives a total budget of 149,697 for a decrease of 42,000. Looking at the revenue, you can see that we have RSSF funding, that's funding 50% of the cost of 74,000. We do get a grant from ESIC, again, for 50,000 that covers some of that urban rural rides contract. And our second previous year surplus from the previous year was 20,040. Means we do see a reduction in the amount that the member charges have to be for 2026. They're a total of 4,429 or a decrease of 16,500.
Questions on regional transportation services?
The question here, how often does this contract, is a contract with worldwide? Is that not the way this works?
Oh, I'll defer. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'll defer that to our new COO.
To you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
The way the resolution of the board was phrased was that we would enter into an agreement with urban rural rides, so long as the costs are being, well, I believe it was a nominal number, $36,500, I believe. So that would trigger a review of the existing contract if that price has pressed through that time. So there's no defined end.
Okay, and just further up or further question, that is it being used? Rural ride, is it being utilized?
Mr. Chair, yeah, it is being used. It's not fully rolled out across the entire region. There are some other services that are being used in other communities right now. But we always knew it would be a slower rollout. So you're not going to see in the actual numbers that they're not going to approach that 36,500. That was priced as if it was going to be rolled out region wide.
Good.
Further questions? Regional transportation?
So the next budget is public safety, again, a relatively small budget. And what's the changes for 2026? It was less corporate services expense allocation. So for expenses, we have some administration expenses, printing and copying, professional services totaling 7,500. That's consistent with the previous year. Those are costs associated when we put on forums for public safety. Our allocation from corporate services is down 33,000 to 63,000, giving a total budget of 70,957. You look up the revenue, you can see regional services support funding coming in of 35,000. And that's a decrease because obviously our corporate expenses decreased and we can only claim 50% to a maximum. Our second previous year surplus is 3929, which means the member charges are 31,549, or a decrease of almost 19,000 for 2026.
Questions on the Regional Public Safety Committee? Okay.
Garrett to whomever. Public safety, like if you look at south of the border, deploying the National Guard for public safety. Here we got a budget of $70,000. What does public safety include?
CEO or?
Yeah, I'll defer to the COO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so public safety in our role, is, an information sharing forum. It's an opportunity for the municipalities that are sitting around the table to raise public safety concerns that we may be able to follow up on, on their behalf. We are not an enforcement agency. The RCMP does that, or the various, municipal police departments may do that. But think of it in the way, an example that I give would be in the spring, there's the spring thaw and there's flooding. That's an opportunity where we may want emergency measures organizations, senior officials from the municipalities along the St. John River, firefighting crews, law enforcement, all in the same room talking about the same issue, and we provide that for them. I hope that answers the question.
That floats not around. Thank you.
Question for the chair to whomever, I guess. Does that role that you just described include, how would I phrase this? Pushing provincial government departments? I'm not sure that's the right word, but advocating with provincial government departments. Does your role include that function?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair. We have board resolutions to speak to lobbying. We do have conversations when we're sitting around those tables with those, with representatives from those departments. And so it is an opportunity to provide them direct feedback on particular issues, if people choose to do that.
CEO, John?
And Mr. Chair, just to add to what Brett had said. I just want to remind everyone, and I think through you, Mr. Chair, to Director DeLong. We also have an upcoming meeting with the Department of Public Safety with the Minister on October 7th in the evening. It's going to be held in Maryland at the Maryland Community Center at 6 p.m. Information's gone out about that. And we're hoping that the communities will come out in force to have that conversation directly with the Minister and his senior staff.
Am I able to put an initiative on your plate?
Not here. It's, you can directly go to the CEO anytime or the chair and do that. We're not here to open up new doors today.
This is a 20-year-old door.
Okay. Any other questions about the budget?
Right, so the last budget for our newer mandated services is sport, recreation, and cultural infrastructure. And again, for 2026, we have less corporate services allocation in this budget. So, you jump to the next page, looking at the expenses, we have a budget for professional services, which is consistent with the previous year of 60,000. And our allocation from corporate services is down about 23,000 to 94,500. Giving us a total budget of 154,508. For our revenues, we have RSSF of 77,000, which funds 50% of the cost. Our second previous year surplus was 9,000. which means the member charges are very consistent with the previous year, total of $68,164.
Any questions about the regional sport recreation and health infrastructure? Okay, we'll move on to the summary, I guess.
Yeah, so the next slide is probably the one that you're all interested in, is what does that mean for my municipality? So you can see that all of the municipalities, with the exception of Nashwauk and Sunbury York South, are going to see decreases in their member charges. And the reason being that Nashwauk and Sunbury York South do not receive a decrease is their tax rate bases grew faster than the others in 2025. So the allocation is based on 2025's tax bases. And typically, the municipalities that are listed here, their tax bases grew 8 to 9%. Those two specific ones actually grew 13 and 14%. So that's why they're paying a larger share this year and did not see a decrease. But overall, our newer services charges, as I like to call them, are decreasing for everybody, a total of $46,632.
Questions?
The next budget is planning and development's budget. So this budget's a little bit bigger than what we've looked at for the other services. 76% of the expenditures in planning and development consist of salaries and benefits. Included in 2026 is one additional employee, which is a building permits coordinator. And that's necessary because of the changes that the province has made. And if you have any questions on that, we have an expert that can answer that. The rental costs that are included in that budget reflect our new office space. There's also been a change to how our Service New Brunswick software is licensed. We used to be able to access it with just a couple licenses. They've changed that. We now have to pay for each individual staff member. So that's resulted in an increased cost as well. And then more corporate services expense allocation is coming into planning and development. But we do have some additional RSSF that we're able to pay for some of these new costs. So in 2025, we were able to access RSSF funding, and we've increased that amount in 2026 to a total of $199,000. So we will start with revenue with planning and development, just because this is a bigger budget with multiple pages. So our contributions from participate, actually, I'll start with the total. Our total budget is $2,554,000. That's an increase of $196,000 from the previous year. The other revenue that we have coming in is $10,000. That's blue plate sales that we sell at the office. Regional services support funding is up $42,500 to a total of $199,000. And our second previous year's surplus is down by $66,000 to $41,000. But it is important to keep in mind that in 2024, we did transfer $135,000 to an operating reserve. So that's why you're seeing a decrease. We actually had a higher surplus had we not chosen to transfer that. So what that means is our contributions from our participating members, because keep in mind there are 3 municipalities that do not receive these services. That is required for 2026 budget to be $2,304,448, or a total increase of $217,000. Now, this represents 3.56 cents on the tax base. In 2025, that was 3.55 cents. So just keep that in mind as well. So looking at the expenses, for administration expenses, we have a total budget of $633,000. That's up $64,000 from the previous year. In salaries and benefits, you can see we do have an increase there. What we've done is all staff get a CPI adjustment, but we've looked at how our staff time is being allocated. So overall, we've changed the allocation. And so that's why it's reflected as an increase in administration salaries and benefits, but you're going to see savings in other areas. So that offsets that. Overall, in this budget, salaries are up 131,000. And that reflects CPI adjustment as well as the building permits coordinating. You'll see that our rental costs are up 19,000 because of the new space. And then the courses and subscriptions are up 17,500, and that reflects the Service New Brunswick licensing as I talked about. On to the next page, you'll see building inspection services. Those expenses are actually down 13,000 from the previous year, for a total of 569,000. The reason being the salaries and benefits, and again, that has to do with the allocation of staff time. There was some savings there of 13,000. For planning and development expenses, we have a budget of 1,144,000. That's up 103,000 from the previous year. The salaries and benefits is the big driver of that. And again, that's not changing the allocation of staff. For our planning advisory services expense, we have a budget of 21,440, slight decrease of just under 1,300 for the year. And then our allocation from corporate services is up 43,000 to a total of 186,000, giving us a total budget for planning and development of 2,554,000. Again, if I had to summarize what's driving that 196,000, Service New Brunswick licensing, the rent, the additional employee, as well as the increased corporate services.
Questions, one, you all know that the revenue shows up on your budget. So the revenue that we get as a result of much of the work that's done through planning shows up on our own budgets, so building permits and so.
Yes, but if I could just add, we collect the building permit here and then we remit them to the various municipalities on a quarterly basis.
So any questions on the planning and development services?
Question through you to the CFO. I'm on the planning and development member charges page. And I'm assuming Sunbury York South's 13% increase in those charges are due to tax-based growth. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Some of that would be due, but this is also an area where we've had to increase the budget, so the budget has increased as well. So you're taking on a little bit bigger share than you have previously, but the most of the driving increase is because of the increased cost that we have to pay for with the additional rent,
Sure.
employee.
But my point is it's not based on usage. In other words, how many times we have a planning development service. It's based on tax base and overall. Okay, I got it.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
It's allocated 100% based on your share of the tax.
Any additional questions? Okay. So before we move, you want to do the summary of that, or I guess the summary's quite self-evident.
You can see what that costs each individual member and overall about 217,000.
So, before we move on to solid waste, just not pause, but to make sure that there are no open questions that, have been sitting there as we're going through this discussion that didn't get addressed in the other budgets. Particularly, okay, maybe I'd ask you to take a minute to just talk about the RSSF funding and the future years availability of that funding and how it's allocated now, so that as this issue comes up, we'll go down the road that people have a good solid understanding of that.
So regional services support funding is something that came into effect in 2024, I believe. Yeah, so before that, it was an RSC grant, which meant we just got the money and we could apply it however we had. When regional services support funding came in, it was implemented as a 50-50 cost share. So you had to spend 50% of your own money in order to access 50% of the government's money. And it used to be on a fund by fund basis. For 2026, they've actually changed how you can do that. It's overall, you have to match 50%. So you can stack it in one area and pay more in another area. It's totally up to the RSC how they choose to access it, but you still have to contribute 50% of the cost before they will give you the other 50%. If you don't spend it, then you're gonna be on the hook to spend it in future years. We currently have not spent all of the regional services support funding that we are eligible for. So there's a significant amount that we are carrying forward, that we can access, but what that means is we would have to increase our budgets. And the municipalities would have to pay more before we would become eligible for that. It was discussed at the finance committee whether we should be doing that, and the feeling around the room was because of the freeze with the tax base and the pressures that are on municipalities, 2026 was not really the year that we should be doing that. We have until 2027 before our first round of funding, which came from 2024, will no longer be accessible to us. So we do have some time to come up with a plan if we do want to put in some more funds to be able to access more funds. Something else that came into effect for 2026 is you can use regional services support funding for infrastructure, regional infrastructure cost sharing. So that is new. It's something that we do need to explore. But up to 25% of our allocation can be used for regional infrastructure cost sharing. So that may be something that the municipalities will be interested in the coming year. And the only other thing I do want to say is that it is now in legislation, the amount of RSSF, there's no end date as to a time frame of when it could end. So it should be accessible to us into many future years.
Thank you very much. Any questions around RSS?
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a point that say the directors around the table, they agree on a project that has to be voted on and has to make sure that we have the consensus of the directors. Then it has to go to the province if the okay, does it not?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, through you, I'm supposed to direct you to Madam Chair or Director Wilson. I'll cover both. However, yeah, so everything that we do with the RSSF has to relate back to our strategic plan in some way, shape, or form. Every year after the budget is approved and we say these are the allocations, this is the way we're going to allocate our RSSF. There are constant discussions happening, normally between myself and ELG or Mary Kay and ELG. And what we would do is we ensure that these are appropriate uses of the funding. So in future years, we can put a plan together. And as long as we relate it back and it's for the implementation of our strategic plan and through our implementation guide and that we use it in a responsible way, very rarely have they said, no, it doesn't fit there. Sometimes they help us make it fit, if you will. So there are some avenues there for us to be successful with it. But at the same time, we just wanted to make sure that, to your point, Madam Chair, it is, we have to have that approved through the province. And so we're exploring what those future plans could look like to back and give a presentation to the board. And then it's the board's decision, it's the board's direction to tell us in which way, how to use any of that surplus funding. And we'll ensure that everything that we do for this year is acceptable to the province ahead of time so that we can have a smooth transition in our budget period. I don't know if there's any questions or if that.
I have a further question, yes, Mr. Chair, if you permit. There's a lot of language in the strategic plan about fairness and equity between member communities in the region and so on and so forth. Does any of that apply to using RSFF funding in a service delivery area where 70% of our members don't use it? It's kind of like giving coupons to some of the kids at class, but not all.
I guess, okay.
Please.
I can't answer the equity question. What I can tell you is why we have chosen to allocate in that area is because we had such a surplus of RSSF that we didn't use it. It was going to stay with the province and nobody would have benefited from it. So that's why we've chosen to allocate it. if we wanted to spend more money and we were at the max that we could actually claim for RSSF, then I think you could probably make a case for, yeah, some people aren't benefiting, and some people are, but without spending more, we can't access it, so we felt like we better take advantage of it in some areas, rather than we did.
Thank you, that's an excellent answer.
Any,
Appreciate it.
Dr. Bliss?
I might add to that, I could be lost on this, but the RSSF for the rural planning, the 10 members participating, 10 and 11. They're the only ones funding the 50% of that to get the RSSF. Am I not correct on that? So there's no charge for that RSSF funding from the other three municipalities, so it's funded by the people using it at the end of the day, which I'm clear of that. I just wanted to make sure that was the right direction on that.
On that, what I'm hearing, okay, that in agreeing with David, that it does put that amount in jeopardy at some point if we maximize all of our SSF fund could be moved around if it was more appropriate, if it needed to be more appropriately allocated. And I think that's always the risk when you have money coming from somewhere. It creates a dependency as well that isn't easy to deal with when things change. So this is something we have. The other thing is that RK mentioned the assessment freeze. Next year, we also have the Regional Service Commission review. Well, it's ongoing right now. We don't know what the impact of that will be, and the property tax review. So there were a lot of things that will end up on our plates next year that we really don't know much about right now. So that's another reason for some reasonable caution in this budget and moving forward to, so that by this time next year, administration will understand the playing field a little bit better in terms of what the future looks like. So. Other questions, Mr. Berkshire?
Through the chair, whoever, so when we talk regional, if I have a project that may be happening in Arcadia, we'll say at the lake, that's got to do with tourism, where it could benefit all the region, but it's in my space, is that still considered regional? Or is that a question?
CEO will address that. It's pretty straightforward, I think.
So in terms of that, Mr. Chair, through you and to Director Sharp, you can, one of the things that we're looking at in the plan is how do we incorporate, in the funding of the excess, is how can we incorporate some form of a potential regional plan around it. So our trail study, for example, is a great idea of that. How do we incorporate to ensure that our biggest partner and our smallest partner are each, back to Director Erickson's point, treated it fairly and equitably? And through that is putting together a strategic plan, looking at how that can work, and then working with the province to ensure that we can help communities if there's one-offs, or, and because it's got a link, right? It's got to be regionally related. So how can we do that? And that's what we're going to be looking at when we bring the plan forward. So there are communities that are ready now.
And it's not just our region, right? Because we border. So if it comes to tourism, you're not gonna shut the tourist off at the gate. He's moving on to the next region. Well, not just Regional Service Commission, capital region.
Mr. Chair, the intention would be to cut off the other region, but my intention would be to get the other region pay their fair share. So I would like to try to get the, I talk to my counterparts weekly in terms of that, and we all have a good relationship and everybody's aware. I mean, there's a trail project that was announced for Western Valley to the northwest of us here. And so we're working, we're finding out what they're doing, and we're coming together here in the fall to get together to have those bigger discussions. Normally that, as of recent, that's been the chair and I tend those to come back and report to the board. So I hope that.
Yeah, through you to the CEO, wouldn't the short answer just be that first it has to be agreed that it's a regional project, and then
if we go for funding from there.
It has to incorporate into the regional plan.
And the plan, yeah, but
So
that
it's
would all be,
incorporated.
that'll all be done through the approval of it being a regional asset or.
Full agreement with the board in
Yeah.
terms.
Additional questions? So we can move on to solid waste.
Okay, that brings us to our largest budget, a little bit more detailed, complicated. So what you're gonna see in solid waste is in 2026 budget, it does reflect the change to our recycling operation. When 2025 budget was prepared, we did not have the final contract. So we didn't know all of the details, but, so we had to make some changes, and that's reflected, in the 2026 budget. In 2025's budget, we did have a large second previous year surplus. So essentially, the difference in the two amounts is about 800,000. So we have to make that up in our budget. And we'll see how we did that. We've also increased our capital reserve fund transfer, as we talked about in our meeting in June, the need to focus in the next 5 years, to building up those reserve funds, which are going to be used to meet our infrastructure needs, come the early 2030s. We've had a significant increase to our corporate service expense allocation because solid waste is the largest budget. With the change in how we allocated, it took on, a lot more of the expenses. We have a reduction in our overall operating expenses of 118,000. So we were trying to be really fiscally responsible and looking for areas that we could produce savings. So despite corporate services increasing a lot, we've found some savings in other areas. So what that all means at the end of the day is we are proposing a $5 tipping fee increase for 2026. And then something that came out of the finance committee is an increase to our construction and demolition rate. That's proposed, they recommended that we increase that $2.50 to a total of $45 per ton. So if you look at our revenues, you can see our regular garbage is the vast majority of our revenue. So we have a budget for 2026 of $9,374,000. That is a $5 tipping fee increase. That's driving that increase of $438,000. So we estimate we'll have about 86,000 tons that come in, and that's based on our historical average over the last 3 years. With a $5 tipping fee increase. So our tipping fee is $109 in the 2026 budget. Our construction and demolition, we have a budget of $315,000. So that represents an increase in tonnage from 6,000 in the previous year's budget. We've increased that to 7,000. And we've increased the fee at the recommendation of the finance committee to $45 per ton. Our recycling revenue is down slowly or slightly by 144,000. And that reflects these agreements that we have, as well as the current level of tonnage that's coming in for recycling fee. Our other revenue is at 358,000 to a budget of 605,000. The increases there relate to our interest income. We are claiming regional services support funding for some of those increased costs from the corporate services allocation, as well as we're going to trade in a dozer. So there's the trade-in value of the dozer. Our rental revenue is up 60,000 to 134,000. That represents increased tonnage for soil remediation from our lessee. And our second previous year surplus, as we talked about on the previous slide, is down almost 800,000 to 253,000. It is important to note that in 2024, we did transfer 900,000 to reserve funds. So they are sitting in reserve funds, which we're trying to build up in the next 5 years. So overall, our budget for solid waste is actually down from the previous year to a total budget of $11,501,000. The next page, you'll see the expenses. So our salaries and benefits are down 96,500 to a total budget of 3.9 million. That represents the CPI adjustment, as well as we have reduced our staff by 3 seasonal operators. We've not included those in 2026's budget. Our maintenance costs are up slightly, almost 10,000 to a budget of 1,523,000. most of that is just to reflect the actual cost of what we're seeing right now. Our equipment costs, we have realized savings of $177,000 for a budget of $1,107,000. So our fuel costs, we really went through and took a hard look at the number of liters that we're looking, that we are actually using. And we saw a moderate decrease in the price per liter of our diesel. So we're budgeting savings of $100,000 there. And then in maintenance and parts, we have savings of $77,000. There was a one-time cost included for equipment in 2025, which doesn't need to be included in the 2026 budget. On the next page, you'll see our baler costs. Again, we've reduced that budget. So we have a budget for 2026 of $596,000. We have decreased the amount that we budgeted for our wire, which is used to tie our bales. That's to reflect the actuals. And then our baler building did include in 2025 a one-time cost for the fire conveyor to be replaced. So that's some savings that we won't have to pay for in 2026. For waste diversion, this reflects the change from our Scotia contract, so we have less costs. The operational cost is the disposal of CFCs or refrigerants, and there's actually revenue included above in the revenues that exactly pay for those costs. For administration expenses, we have a total budget of $1,374,000. That's an increase of $96,500. You can see most of those line items have increased to reflect the actuals. The biggest one being for our professional fees, that's engineering costs. That's up about $64,000 from the previous year's budget. Our debt servicing costs on the next page are down $232,000. The reason being, we were originally set to replace a piece of equipment in 2025. Staff's determined that it can increase the useful life of that piece of equipment, so we are not going to be borrowing for that cost. So we have some debenture savings going into 2026. Our post-closing costs, we have a budget of $12,000, which is what we set aside for when the landfill is closed, so that we have funds available to be able to remediate the site and maintain it. And then on our capital expenditures, we have a budget of $355,000. That's up from the previous year by $120,000. That includes projects for 2026 would be site paving, purchase of a new wire tire, as well as a tractor mower. And then cell expansion costs, because we are piggybacking and going up top on the current cells, the cost related to cells is relatively low compared to what they would be if we were building a cell from scratch. So total capital expenditures are budgeted at $455,000. That's an increase of $220,000 from the previous year's budget. We did not have any cell expansion costs in 2025. Our transfer to reserves. So again, we're really focusing on building those reserves so that we have the funds in place when they're needed in approximately 5 years' time. So we've budgeted $50,000 to an operating reserve, and then we increased the transfer to the capital reserve to $717,500. That's an increase of $92,500 from the previous year. And then our allocation from corporate services, as we've talked about, that's increased to $779,000. So overall, that budget of $11,501, which is about $118,403 in expense savings that we were able to realize when we factor in the transfer to the reserves. So what does that mean? For 2026, we talked that it's a $5 increase, but if we look to the future over the next 5 years, based on the information that we know right now, what we can expect is approximately $3 to $4 increases per ton in each of the next 4 years. And I am hopeful that that is on the high side, on the conservative. So that is what it looks like right now, based on the information we have. So honestly, that can change, but I would expect that would be on the high side.
Thank you very much. Questions on solid fuels?
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you. With the C&D charges, it's my understanding that staff do not recommend the small increase. but the finance committee did. Is that correct? They're recommending the slight,
Consensus, the finance committee, the consensus in the finance committee was that it should increase, yes. And 250 was the number that we kind of settled on. In that discussion, the numbers ranged quite widely in terms of what the recommendation might be in the finance committee. In the end, when I went back to the COO to talk about profitability of that particular line of business, because that's a concern. If you're not making enough money, then you should probably increase your fees. In that case, we were informed that that is a very lucrative line of business currently, and it's not losing money, it's making money for us. That being said, I think I know the consensus around the table was that if we're putting up the other $5 a ton, then we should have some increase in the construction materials. And it was felt that the 250 was reasonable, although it will generate very little revenue and it will not impact the other operating costs very significantly.
thank you.
Any questions? And I want to make sure that we've noted that going through this, that the fees will more than likely increase $3 to $4 a ton year on year going forward. And that's that responsibility to build those reserves to a place that will allow us to continue to function without adding $50 a ton sometime in the future.
So the next slide really, just summarizes what that impact would have on the various municipalities. So we have estimated tonnage, keep in mind that you do pay on your actual tonnage that's brought in, but based on history, you can see what each municipality's estimated tonnage is. And then the last column shows what that increase would be for a $5 fee increase. Obviously, Fredericton's would be the largest at 72,000, and Tracy's the smallest with $775 estimated impact.
Questions?
So the next slide that you have is the capital projects, and I passed on those because these ones come from our operations. So we have paving of 125,000, a wire tire purchase of 100,000, and then a tractor mower for a cost of 130,000. So nothing in the sense. There are two pieces of equipment that we are proposing to borrow for. So typically our larger pieces of equipment, we go to the municipal capital borrowing board and we apply for financing through that. And there's required disclosures that we have to make to the board in order to prepare that application. That's included on the bottom of the slide. So the impact of borrowing for these two pieces of equipment that total $890,000 is estimated to be $3,400 in 2026. And then as we pay back the principal and interest, it's about $202,700 per year, or $2.36 on tipping fee. Keeping in mind that we do have other debentures that will be retired, and this one is issued. So it's not actually $2.36, it's more like $1 because we have some savings from those debentures that are being paid. The estimated debt service ratio after these pieces of equipment are financed would be just under 11%. So we are in a strong position, and our debt management policy calls for a maximum 15% debt service cost, and we're at about 11%. So great position to be in.
For you, Mr. Chair, Gary Day, so I know you said $2.36 on the tipping fees, 27 to 31. Just a minute ago, you said $3 to $4 a ton for the next 5 years. So that includes with that $3 to $4, or is that in addition to the 3 to 4?
Okay.
So that is included. So we'll have some savings as the one hired and it's already factored in.
Anyone else? Questions on those?
Okay, that brings us to our last budget, which is our generation facility budget. This facility is producing healthy surpluses, but we have had some issues in 2025. And so we have factored that into the 2026 budget. So we would reduce the amount of expected revenue that we're expecting the facility to generate. In 2026, we are required to produce balanced budgets, which means at the end of the day, we have to have a zero at the bottom. Generation facility is made to generate profit, obviously. In order to produce balanced budgets, what that means is any surplus that we expect, we just put that into a reserve fund for budget purposes. So when you see the amount transferred to the budget fund, that's really what the surplus is expected to be for power generation for 2026. So the budgeted amount that's going to reserve fund in 2026 is $295,000. That's what we estimate the surplus will be. So starting with revenue, for generation revenue, as I mentioned, we have decreased the amount that we project because of the issues that we are seeing with gas, as well as some of the reliability of engines. So a total budget for 2026 of $1,360,000. That's down $132,000 from the previous year. Our second previous year surplus is down $289,000 to $28,000. Important to keep in mind that we did have a stellar year in 2024, and we did transfer $730,000 to reserve funds. So that those are sitting there, can access them as we need to repair the engines and upkeep them in that way. On the expense side of things, our operational costs, we have a budget of $673,000. That's up about $25,000 from the previous year. We do have our 20,000 hourly maintenance interval that's required on engine number 2 that comes up in 2026. We're going to do it on engine 1 in 2025. For administration expenses, we are seeing some savings with regard to insurance, so that's why you're seeing less expenses, $37,000 versus $60,000 in the previous year's budget. Debt servicing is consistent at $311,000. Our allocation from corporate services is down $25,000 to $71,608. And then you see the two amounts that we are proposing to transfer to reserve funds. So $61,000 to an operating reserve and $234,000 to a capital reserve. Gives us a total budget for power generation of $1,388,000 for 2026.
Questions on power generation?
For you to the CFO, is there a target for reserve that we target that very well?
Yeah, so in that draft reserve fund policy, we have targeted an amount for power generation. I believe off the top of my head, I had it at 1.5 million. Probably gonna come back and revise that because our estimates are going up for what it costs to replace. But it's probably gonna be more about 2 million, I would say. Just based on the information we got with regard to this budget. And once we reach that 2 million.
Would that be, the 2 million be for a full replacement of what you see coming, or is that, because we always take it to venture or finance as well, so is that taken into consideration with the reserve?
Yeah, so the 2 million would be to replace the engine block, which is required at 360,000 hours.
Got it. That's a full replacement, so there'd be no debt taken on at that point, it would just be reduction in reserve, there you go.
Block swap. There you go.
Great.
No questions? Okay.
All right, the last slide I have for you is really just a summary. This is something that I think we came up with last year, just to give you a big picture of what is going on in one spot, because there are so many pieces to this budget. So what I want to highlight is if you look, overall, our budget is down 393,000. You see that halfway down the page. Our reserve fund transfers are also down because of the fewer amount of money that power generation is generating. We have less of a transfer to that reserve fund. So overall, if you look at the last column, the budget is down to 89,000 from the previous year. Across the board, most things are down with the exception of local planning, tourism promotion, and economic development. So we've really tried to focus on areas that we can see expense savings to be able to pass them on to you. That's been our focus this year. We know the pressures that are on municipalities, and we're trying to help as much as we can in those areas. The change in revenues shows that we're getting additional RSSF funding of 76,000. We've decreased our member charges for the newer mandated services by 46,000. We've increased member charges for planning and development by 217,000. We have additional other revenue of 3,000. And then our decrease in our second previous year surplus, the vast majority of that is from solid waste. It is important to note that 2024 actually had higher surpluses, but we did transfer those to reserve funds. Our tipping fee increase generates an additional 430,000. We have increased in other revenue of 222,000. Power generation is down 132,000, and then we have some other funding. So that's where you see how we're coming up with $393,000 difference from the previous year's budget.
Is on the summary.
Question through Chair to the CFO again. Maybe it's because I'm from a relatively new rural community. But line number 6, Economic Development Fund, 2.4 million. Where's that money go? What's being used for?
We came through that budget. It was on, it was, the economic development budget was
Well,
part of what we were doing this morning.
all I see is professional services.
Not budget. And if you would, please.
So we have a contract with Ignite that provides all of those services for the various municipalities. So the vast majority of that budget is paid to them.
So do you have some sort of a report on the result of that $2.4 million?
We'll see you all.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So there's a business plan, the way the process works through you, Mr. Chair, to Director Gallant. The two professional contract services that we have with Frederick Tourism and Ignite, they come into the economic expansion program every year, or to the committee, sorry. They present their plan, and that plan is then referred to the board. That's reported to the board, and then it's reported back on the board as to the successes of that plan at the annual meetings each year. Within that as well, there's not just the plan, but we also have members of this of our group here today, of the board of directors, that sit on the board of Ignite as in a capacity as a director there as well, to provide additional oversight within that as well. So they come out, there's a plethora of services that they have. I'll just say this, they've gone from roughly about a dozen services prior to regionalization to over 44 services that are applied to in the region. And again, 100% satisfaction is not achievable, so I'm pretty happy with 85 to 90.
I see tangible evidence of the tourism contract. I see that every day. Where can I go to that report, the economic development report, to actually see the result?
And you can go to their website, you can see the things that are happening in the region. And not only that, but they also have statistics now that are being developed for the return on investment.
That's what I'm looking
So,
for.
and that's what we're doing, that's what we're working on, but I can explain that. And we can put you in touch with, if you haven't, if anyone at this table has an issue with either of those two service providers, it goes through me and I go directly to the service
I'm
provider.
not saying I have an issue, but being a new municipality, so we see no evidence of it.
And we terminate its purpose. Director Morrison.
Yep, through the chairperson, if you want to get Ignite to come out to your municipality and report on what they've been doing, we've just done that a couple months ago. They come in for us, met with all the council and give them a really good overview of what they're actually doing for Hanwell and in Hanwell. So that thing will do is provide that information for you if you desire.
So, okay, thank you. For,
Sorry, Mr. Chair, for the, just a very small request moving forward and future reports. Is there any way we could have the pages numbered? Yeah, if I was walking in and all my papers went flying, I wouldn't have a clue where to put them back in. It's just a small request. Thank you.
so before I hand this back over to the chair. Committee of the whole. And Finance Committee's has met twice on this budget. Lots of issues were raised and discussed, some resolutions were found. We're here today to dive into the numbers and the changes and the cost as deeply as we possibly can. And as you would expect, when you have committee of the whole in your own organizations, you deal with the issues at that time as much as you can. Not to say that something new can pop up in the meantime and cause some discussion going forward, but I guess I would just say that I appreciate it. If there are financial issues that you didn't get to today, that you have a concern about, so now's the time to bring that up if there is anything on the financial side, so that we know that when your CAOs have seen and will see this again and dive into it, and there may be some issues that come out of that, but most of them should have been dealt with by now, so. So further questions before I throw in the towel? Director Morrison.
I'd just like to congratulate Mary Kay on the preparation of the budget. She did an excellent job, and this presentation today was absolutely top notch, so.
I just think it was very smart decision by the finance committee. Because if you sat here, went through and listened to it, should make our lives a little bit easier going forward when we actually vote on this. Myself, that's my opinion, but, and it's very smart. I asked my CAO to go through our book on it. It's the exact same. Amazing how much money you save. Which, in fact, so. Good job.
And Mr. Chair, hope we put it back.
I'm with you, Bob.
I can't believe you haven't been poached on it, so. Will I be hiring you if I was there?
Listen, we don't wanna lose a chance.
That's just.
That it? So. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Corey. You did an excellent job for us. And again, I thank you, staff member Mary Kay. I always appreciate certain commitment and you're very well organized. Thank you on behalf of the board. So we have to decide today if we're going to have another committee of the whole meeting to discuss the budget. And it's scheduled for next week, right?
September, sorry, Madam Chair, through you to the members. We're scheduled, it would be part of the board meeting on the September 4th. So, if there's a desire to assemble again to talk specifically about the budget in this kind of a format with a more relaxed atmosphere, we can certainly agree to do that. And it will be just incorporated. We'll go through our board meeting and then we'll go into committee of the whole.
So the directors have to decide if they want another meeting to discuss the budget as a committee as a whole. Yes,
I don't see where much is gonna change within a week, so I think our regular meeting will be fine. I don't see going over all this again in a week's time unless something really changes drastically between now and then.
okay, is there anyone around the table that,
Sorry, Madam Chair, Director Erickson. had
Yes.
one.
Yeah, city of Frederick prepared to vote for the budget as presented.
they're prepared to vote as presented?
For the budget, so.
Well, thank you very much. So there won't be any amendments coming? Okay, thank you.
There's a round of applause.
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Well, the Grand Lakes ready to vote, I can't listen to myself talk anymore.
So I think it's settled then that we do not need to have another meeting on September the 4th. Really good comments around the table and I'm very, very pleased with everybody speaking up. Yes. So with that, then I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn, please.
To adjourn, Dave.